I stared at my mother-in-law, Clara, in disbelief. Her perfectly coiffed hair and impeccable makeup couldn't mask the smug expression on her face. I said, "I'll be hosting my annual charity gala here at your home this weekend," she repeated, eyeing the living room with disdain. "And you'll be assisting me, of course." I fought the urge to roll my eyes. Typical Clara, barging in and taking over without asking. "I have a major project due next week," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "I can't just drop everything to cater to your whims." Her laugh was condescending. "A project? Don't be ridiculous, Erin. Your little design jobs are hardly a priority compared to the important work I do for the community." My cheeks burned, but I refused to back down. "This little design job pays our bills, in case you've forgotten." "Yes, well, we can't all have husbands with real careers, can we?" She waved a perfectly manicured hand dismissively. Now about the gala. As Clara droned on about guest lists and catering, I tuned her out, seething inside. This was just like her, acting like my work was meaningless, assuming I'd drop everything to serve her every whim. Well, not this time. "So you'll need to have the house spotless," Clara was saying. "I can't have my guests thinking we live like slobs." That did it. "You know what, Clara?" I cut her off, my voice tight with barely contained fury. "I'll host your precious gala." Her eyebrows shot up, clearly surprised by my uncharacteristic defiance. "You will? Yes, and I'll make it the best damn event you've ever seen." I leaned in, locking eyes with her. "Just watch me." For once, Clara seemed at a loss for words. Good. Maybe now she'd finally see that I wasn't the pushover she thought I was. This gala was war, and I had no intention of losing. The moment Clara swept out of the house, a manic grin spread across my face. This was it, my chance to finally prove her wrong about me. I pulled out my laptop, cracking my knuckles as I opened up a new project file. Time to get organized. For the next few hours, I mapped out a meticulous plan, breaking down every aspect of the gala into manageable tasks: catering, decor, guest list, entertainment. I covered it all, reveling in the thrill of executing a major event. This was what I lived for. By the time Nate got home that evening, I'd already secured 3 potential caterers and was comparing their menus. "What's all this?" he asked, peering over my shoulder. "Your mother's gala," I replied curtly. "I'm taking charge." He let out a low whistle. "Bold move. You know how she gets?" "Exactly." I turned to face him, my jaw set with determination. "Which is why I'm going to blow this event out of the water. Clara thinks I am some hapless little housewife who can't handle real responsibility. Well, she's in for a rude awakening." A small smile tugged at the corners of Nate's mouth. "You've got that look in your eye," he murmured. "I almost feel sorry for her." I shot him a steely glance. "Don't. She brought this on herself with her constant belittling and meddling." I shook my head, the anger resurging within me. "I'm done being her doormat, Nate. It's time she learned some respect." He held up his hands in surrender. "Hey, I'm not arguing with you. Just don't go too far, okay? You know how vicious she can get?" There was a tinge of warning in his voice that I chose to ignore. Let Clara throw her worst at me. I could handle it. This was about more than just putting on some fancy party. It was about standing up for myself, about showing that shrew of a mother-in-law that I wasn't the pushover she thought. No more Miss Nice Erin. If she wanted a war, she'd get one. Over the next few days, I attacked the preparations with single-minded focus. I interviewed caterers, toured their kitchens, and scrutinized every last detail. I pored over fabric swatches and floral arrangements, determined to create an aesthetic that would put Clara's past events to shame. And through it all, I could sense her watching me from the sidelines, those cold eyes narrowed in suspicion. A few times, she even tried to insert herself, offering helpful suggestions that were really just thinly veiled critiques. "That color palette is a bit bold, don't you think?" she'd say, wrinkling her nose at the rich jewel tones I'd chosen. "Or the portions from that caterer seem rather petite. You'll want something more substantial if you don't want people leaving hungry." Each time, I'd flash her a saccharine smile and politely stand my ground. "Don't worry, Clara, I've got it all under control." The look of consternation on her face was priceless. She'd always been the one calling the shots, and for once the tables were turned, and she clearly didn't like it one bit. Good. If she thought I was going to buckle under her scrutiny, she was sorely mistaken. This gala was my turf now, and by the time it was over, Clara would have no choice but to respect me, whether she wanted to or not. As the gala preparations kicked into high gear, I began noticing little things going awry, tiny sabotages that could only be the work of one person. Clara. First, it was the catering company I'd hired backing out at the last minute. Some vague excuse about a kitchen fire. Then, the florist called to say they were out of the specific varietal of roses I'd requested, even though I'd placed the order weeks in advance. At first, I tried to shrug it off as mere coincidence, but then I overheard Clara on the phone one afternoon, her sickly sweet voice dripping with false sympathy. "Oh, you poor dear, having to cope with such an incompetent host for my event." A pause, then a pointed look in my direction. "Well, you know how it is, some people just aren't cut out for this sort of thing." My blood boiled, but I bit my tongue, refusing to give her the satisfaction of a reaction. Two could play at her little mind games. Instead, I doubled down, working twice as hard to course correct around her petty interferences. When the caterer fell through, I managed to book an even better one, a prestigious company that just so happened to be Clara's former vendor before they'd parted ways on bad terms. The look on her face when she realized who I'd hired was utterly priceless. "You can't be serious, Aaron," she hissed at me one evening once the ink had dried on the contract. "After everything they've done to smear my reputation?" I shrugged, feigning innocence. "They came highly recommended, and their menu is to die for." Clara's eyes narrowed to slits. "You knew exactly what you were doing, didn't you?" "Whatever do you mean?" I batted my eyelashes at her. "I'm simply trying to put together the best possible event for you, Mother." She opened her mouth, no doubt to hurl a biting retort my way, but seemed to think better of it. With a curt snort, she spun on her heel and stormed off. I permitted myself a tiny smirk. "Point, Aaron." Of course, that was just the beginning of our escalating hostilities. As the gala drew nearer, Clara's attempts to undermine me grew increasingly brazen and increasingly transparent. Fake termite tenting notices, printed with a bogus company name, were left around the house where her snooty charity friends could easily spot them. Mysterious double bookings with vendors I'd already secured. Heck, I even caught her rewriting portions of the guest list, no doubt in an effort to stack the attendees against me. Each time, I shut her down with a polite smile and an iron grip on the reins, making it clear who was really in charge. But it was more than just gamesmanship at this point. It was personal. With every hostile action, her true colors shone through more and more. This wasn't just about the gala anymore. It was about exposing Clara for the petty, manipulative shrew she really was. One morning, I caught her in the act of scribbling disparaging comments about me in the notations column of the master guest list, insults and snide remarks that those who didn't know better might easily take at face value. "What do you think you're doing?" I demanded, snatching the binder out of her hands. For once, she didn't try to deny it, simply sneering, ensuring my guests know what kind of hostess they're dealing with. I shook my head slowly, tamping down the rage boiling up inside me. "You just can't help yourself, can you? Always scheming, always putting others down to make yourself feel better." "Don't take it so personally, dear." Her smile was saccharine poison. "I'm just trying to manage expectations." No, I took a step closer, holding her gaze with steely conviction. "No more lies, Clara. No more manipulations." I jabbed a finger at her. "This gala is going to be perfect, and by the time it's over, everyone's going to see you for who you really are." She drew herself up haughtily, but I could see the briefest flicker of uncertainty in her cold eyes. "Is that a threat?" "No," I allowed myself a thin smile, baring my teeth. "It's a promise. Game on, you wretched old harpy." I was done playing nice, and by the end of all this, it would be Clara who was exposed as the fraud, not me. As if Clara's sabotage attempts weren't enough, I soon realized she was trying to turn Nate against me too. Whenever he was around, she'd make snide comments about how stressed I seemed, or not so subtly imply that I was in over my head with the gala. "Are you sure you can handle all this, dear?" She'd trill in that sickly sweet tone. It seems like an awful lot for one person to take on. Nate, bless his heart, would just shake his head and smile weakly whenever I shot him an exasperated look. "Don't let her get to you," he'd murmur. "You know how she is." But the digs kept coming, Clara's needling growing more pointed by the day, and as much as I tried to brush it off, I could see the seeds of doubt starting to take root in Nate's mind. Would I really be able to pull this off, or was I cracking under the pressure like his mother claimed? The thought made my chest tighten with anger and determination. No way was I going to give that miserable shrew the satisfaction of being right. Fortunately, I wasn't completely alone in my war against Clara. As it turned out, I wasn't the only one of her so-called friends who had been on the receiving end of her two-faced treachery over the years. By sheer chance, one of the vendors I'd hired put me in touch with a woman named Elisa, one of Clara's former confidants who'd suffered a brutal falling out after daring to outshine her at some charity luncheon years earlier. That woman is a viper. Eliza warned me one afternoon over coffee. She'll stop at nothing to claw her way to the top, even if it means sabotaging those closest to her. I shuddered, realizing how accurately she was describing the stunts Clara had already pulled. You're telling me she's made this entire process a nightmare all because she can't stand to see me succeed? Eliza nodded grimly. Believe me, I know the feeling, which is why she leaned in conspiratorially. I want to help take her down a peg or two. My eyes widened, but I couldn't deny the thrill of excitement that zipped through me. What did you have in mind? It turned out Eliza wasn't the only one of Clara's former inner circle who had horror stories to share. Over the next few days, she introduced me to an entire network of wealthy women who had all fallen victim to Clara's vindictive narcissism at one point or another. There was Margaret, whose dream kitchen renovation had ended up being featured in Clara's favorite design magazine instead of her own an incident Clara had orchestrated through underhanded means. And Diane, who had donated a small fortune to one of Clara's pet charities only to be ruthlessly edged out from a committee position she had been promised. One by one, these women shared their stories, their hurt and anger still palpable years later. And as I listened, a plan began to take shape in my mind. We can't just let her keep getting away with this, I declared one afternoon as we convened in Margaret's parlor over bone-dry scones. She has to be stopped. Here, Eliza agreed, raising her teacup. I'll drink to that. But how? Diane shook her head glumly. That woman has more lives than a cat. She always seems to land on her feet no matter what. I sat back, chewing my lip as I considered their words. They were right. Simply exposing Clara's vindictiveness wouldn't be enough. Not when she'd so deftly deflected countless accusations in the past. No, if we were going to take her down once and for all, we'd need to strike at the very heart of what she valued most: her wealth, her status, her sense of superiority over everyone around her. We'd need to dismantle her precious hierarchy from the inside out. A slow smile curved my lips as the plan crystallized. Ladies, what would you say to making this gala one for the history books? Diane arched one perfectly groomed eyebrow. I'm listening. Over the next few days, we plotted and schemed, trading strategies like girlfriends dishing about a hot new crush. And with each new co-conspirator I brought into the fold, I felt a giddy sense of anticipation building inside me. Let Clara try to throw obstacles in my way. Let her whisper and taunt and do her worst. Because by the time this gala was over, she wouldn't know what hit her. Revolution was coming and I was leading the charge. The night before the gala, I was putting the finishing touches on the seating arrangements when my phone rang. Frowning at the unfamiliar number, I answered with trepidation. Hello? Aaron? A familiar voice crackled on the line. It was Charlotte, one of Clara's oldest friends, though more an acquaintance in truth. Charlotte, I asked, my curiosity piqued. What can I do for you? I heard what you're planning, she said, her voice low and urgent. And I want in. I raised an eyebrow, taken aback. You do? Absolutely, she confirmed. I've been putting up with Clara's antics for decades. It's high time someone put her in her place. I can help, but we'll need to move quickly. I smiled, the last piece of the puzzle falling into place. Welcome to the revolution, Charlotte. The day of the gala dawned bright and clear, the crisp morning air tinged with the scent of blooming roses and freshly cut grass. The estate was a hive of activity, vendors and staff bustling about, putting the final touches on the grand setup. As I walked through the gardens, overseeing the preparations, I felt a sense of calm determination settle over me. Today was the day. Clara, of course, was a bundle of nerves, flitting about like a frantic bird. Every so often, she would shoot me a venomous look, as if hoping to unsettle me. But I was past being rattled. I had a mission, and nothing would deter me. Aaron, the champagne glasses are not perfectly aligned, she snapped at me in the early afternoon. I'll take care of it, I replied smoothly, signaling to one of the staff to make the adjustments. By the time the first guests began to arrive, the estate was a picture of elegance and splendor. Twinkling lights adorned the trees, and the tables were set with the finest china and crystal. The air was filled with the soft strains of a string quartet, lending an air of sophistication to the evening. I watched from a distance as Clara greeted her guests, her smile brittle and forced. She knew, deep down, that something was amiss. She just didn't know what. Yet, as the night wore on, everything proceeded without a hitch. The guests mingled and laughed, sipping champagne and sampling the gourmet hors d'oeuvres. Clara's friends, my co-conspirators, played their parts to perfection, their smiles masking the simmering tension beneath. And then, at the height of the evening, it was time for the piece de resistance. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, stepping onto the small stage set up in the garden. "If I could have your attention, please." The chatter died down as everyone turned to face me, curiosity flickering in their eyes. "Thank you all for being here tonight," I began, my voice steady and confident. "This gala is a celebration of the charitable work that we all hold dear, but it's also a testament to the strength and resilience of our community." I paused, scanning the crowd until my gaze landed on Clara, standing near the front, her eyes narrowed suspiciously. As many of you know, this event was organized under the guidance of a remarkable woman, my mother Clara. A smattering of polite applause rippled through the crowd, though I noticed a few hesitant claps, likely from those already aware of the undercurrents at play. "Clara has always been a pillar of this community," I continued, my tone laced with sincerity. "But tonight I'd like to share a different story, a story of how this event came together despite numerous obstacles." I saw Clara's face blanch as she realized where this was heading, but before she could react, I pressed on. "In the weeks leading up to tonight, we faced many challenges," I said, my voice rising. "From last-minute vendor cancellations to unexpected setbacks. But through it all, we persevered. And we did so because of the support and determination of every single person here." I paused, letting my words sink in. "But there's more. Tonight, we honor not just the charitable work, but the truth. The truth about how we overcome adversity. The truth about the strength of our community when we stand together." And with that, I nodded to Eliza, who stood at the back of the crowd. She stepped forward, holding a thick folder, the dossier of evidence we'd gathered on Clara's machinations. "This," I said, my voice unwavering, "is a collection of accounts from those who have faced similar challenges orchestrated by someone who should have been their ally." The crowd murmured in confusion and anticipation as Eliza handed me the folder. I opened it, extracting a few key documents and holding them up. "These are statements from vendors, former friends and colleagues," I declared, each one detailing how they were undermined, manipulated, and betrayed. Gasps rippled through the crowd as realization dawned. Clara stood frozen, her face a mask of shock and horror. "And yet," I continued, my voice firm, "each of these individuals has shown remarkable resilience. They have rebuilt, succeeded, and thrived in spite of the obstacles thrown their way. Tonight, we celebrate them as much as we celebrate our cause." I held the documents aloft for a moment longer before handing them back to Eliza, who began distributing copies to the nearest guests. As they read, I could see the expressions of disbelief and outrage spreading through the crowd. "Now, I know this may come as a shock to many of you," I said, my gaze fixed on Clara, who seemed to be on the verge of fainting, "but it's important that we acknowledge the truth and support those who have been wronged. It's only by facing these issues head-on that we can grow stronger as a community." The murmurs grew louder, and I saw several people moving towards Clara, their expressions a mix of anger and betrayal. Clara tried to regain her composure, but the facade was crumbling. The whispers of dissent that had once been easy for her to dismiss had now become a roar that she couldn't ignore. "I never meant for any of this to happen," Clara stammered, her voice shaking. "These accusations are baseless. I've always had the best interest of this community at heart." But her words fell on deaf ears. The tide had turned, and there was no stopping it now. Nate, who had been standing at the edge of the crowd, stepped forward, his face pale but determined. "Mother," he said, his voice filled with disappointment, "how could you do this? To all these people, to our family." Clara turned to him, her eyes wide with desperation. "Nate, you have to believe me. I was only trying to help." But Nate shook his head. "No, Mother, this isn't helping. This is hurting, and it's time for it to stop." As Clara's protests were drowned out by the rising voices of the crowd, I felt a surge of relief and satisfaction. The truth was out, and Clara's reign of manipulation was finally coming to an end. The rest of the evening was a blur of emotions. There were tears and hugs, apologies and promises of support. People came up to me, thanking me for having the courage to expose the truth and vowing to stand by those who had been wronged. The sense of camaraderie and solidarity was palpable, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a genuine sense of hope. As the gala wound down and the last of the guests departed, I found myself standing alone in the garden, taking in the quiet beauty of the night. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a soft glow over the scene. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, savoring the peace that had eluded me for so long. "Aaron?" I turned to see Nate approaching, a tentative smile on his face. "Hey," I said softly. "How are you holding up?" He shrugged, looking a little shell-shocked but resolute. "It's a lot to take in, but I'm glad the truth is finally out. Thank you for everything you did." I smiled, reaching out to squeeze his hand. "We did it together, Nate. This was a team effort." He nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "What happens now?" "Now," I said, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders, "we rebuild. We move forward, and we make sure this community becomes stronger and more united than ever." As we stood there side by side, I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges and setbacks, and it would take time to heal the wounds that Clara had inflicted. But for the first time, I felt confident that we could face whatever came our way. Because in the end, it wasn't just about taking Clara down. It was about standing up for what was right, supporting each other, and building a future that was brighter and more inclusive for everyone. And with that, I knew we were on the right path. As the weeks passed, the community began to heal. Clara's removal from the board and subsequent public apology had been a turning point, but there was still much work to be done. Nate and I, along with our dedicated group of supporters, set out to rebuild trust and lay the groundwork for a more inclusive and transparent organization. We started by holding a series of town hall meetings, inviting everyone in the community to voice their concerns, share their ideas, and participate in the decision-making process. The first few meetings were tense, with many people expressing their anger and hurt. But as time went on, those raw emotions began to give way to constructive dialogue. "I never thought I'd see the day when we'd have a real say in how things are run," said Mrs. Jenkins, one of the longtime residents, at a particularly well-attended meeting. "It's about time we all had a voice." Her words were met with enthusiastic applause, and I felt a swell of pride. This was what we had been fighting for, a community where everyone felt valued and heard. In addition to the meetings, we launched several new initiatives aimed at fostering a sense of unity and collaboration. We organized volunteer projects, community cleanups, and social events designed to bring people together. These activities not only helped to repair the physical and emotional damage left in Clara's wake, but also created new bonds of friendship and mutual support. One of the most impactful initiatives was the establishment of a scholarship fund for underprivileged youth in the community, named in honor of those who had been wronged by Clara's actions. The fund provided much-needed financial assistance to students who showed promise and determination, but lacked the resources to pursue their dreams. "It's amazing what a little bit of help can do," said Sarah, one of the first scholarship recipients at a fundraising event. "This scholarship has changed my life, and I'm so grateful to everyone who made it possible." Her heartfelt speech brought tears to my eyes, and I knew that we were making a real difference. The scholarship fund quickly became a cornerstone of our efforts, symbolizing the positive change that was possible when people came together for a common cause. Through it all, Nate and I grew closer, our bond strengthened by the trials we had faced and the victories we had achieved. We spent countless hours brainstorming, planning, and supporting each other, and our friendship deepened into something more. One evening, after a particularly successful community event, we found ourselves alone in the garden once again. The moon was high, casting a gentle glow over the scene, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers. "I couldn't have done any of this without you," Nate said, his voice soft and sincere. I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me. "We make a pretty good team, don't we?" He nodded, his gaze intense. "We do. And I want you to know how much I appreciate everything you've done, not just for the community, but..." Before I could respond, he took my hand and pulled me into an embrace. His lips found mine, and the kiss was both tender and passionate, a culmination of all the emotions we had shared over the past months. As we pulled back, breathless and smiling, I knew that this was just the beginning. There would be more challenges ahead, but I also knew that we were ready to face them together. In the years that followed, the community continued to thrive. The changes we had implemented took root, and the sense of unity and purpose only grew stronger. Clara's shadow no longer loomed over us, and the scars she had left began to fade. Nate and I eventually married, our bond a testament to the power of love and resilience. Together we raised a family and remained deeply involved in the community we had helped to transform. Looking back, I realized that our journey had been about more than just exposing the truth and taking down a tyrant. It had been about finding our own strength, building something meaningful, and creating a legacy of hope and compassion. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all. As the years rolled on, the community flourished in ways we had only dreamed of. The initiatives we started grew and evolved, bringing new life and opportunities to everyone involved. The scholarship fund expanded, and each year, more students like Sarah found the support they needed to pursue their dreams. One of the most significant changes came when we decided to renovate and repurpose the old community center. The building, once a symbol of Clara's control and manipulation, was transformed into a vibrant hub of activity. It housed a new library, classrooms for adult education, and spaces for various community programs. The grand reopening of the center was a memorable event. The entire community gathered to celebrate, and as I looked around at the smiling faces, I felt a deep sense of accomplishment. We had turned a place of darkness into a beacon of hope. "We did it," Nate whispered in my ear, wrapping his arm around my shoulders. "We really did it." I leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his presence. "Yes, we did. And this is just the beginning." Our efforts didn't go unnoticed. Other communities began to reach out, asking for advice and support in starting their own initiatives. We formed partnerships and shared our experiences, helping to spread the spirit of collaboration and empowerment beyond our own borders. One particularly rewarding project was our collaboration with a neighboring town that had been struggling with similar issues. We helped them establish their own scholarship fund and community programs, and soon, they too began to see positive changes. "It's incredible to see how much we've accomplished together," said Linda, the mayor of the neighboring town, during one of our joint meetings. "Your community has been an inspiration to us all." Her words were a testament to the impact we had made, and I couldn't have been prouder. The ripple effect of our work was creating waves of change far and wide. In our own community, we continued to innovate and adapt. We launched new programs aimed at addressing the evolving needs of our residents, such as mental health services, job training workshops, and environmental sustainability initiatives. Each new project was met with enthusiasm and support, reinforcing the sense of unity that had become our hallmark. As for our personal lives, Nate and I found a balance between our community work and our growing family. Our children, inspired by our efforts, became active participants in the community from a young age. They volunteered at events, helped with cleanup projects, and even proposed their own ideas for making a difference. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, our oldest daughter, Emma, shared her dream of starting a youth leadership program. "I want to help kids my age learn how to make a positive impact, just like you and Dad did," she said, her eyes shining with determination. Nate and I exchanged a proud glance. "That's a wonderful idea, Emma," I said. "We'll support you every step of the way." Emma's program quickly gained traction, and soon young people from all over the community were participating in workshops, planning projects, and learning the skills they needed to become the next generation of leaders. Seeing our children carry on our legacy was incredibly fulfilling. It was a reminder that the work we had started was not just for us, but for future generations. They were growing up in a community that valued integrity, compassion, and collaboration, and they were eager to continue the journey we had begun. As the years passed, Nate and I occasionally took a step back to reflect on how far we had come. We often found ourselves in the garden, the place where it all began, reminiscing about the challenges we had faced and the triumphs we had achieved. "It's amazing to think about everything we've accomplished," Nate said one evening, his voice filled with wonder. We've built something truly special here." I nodded, feeling a deep sense of contentment. We have, and it's all thanks to the incredible people we've had by our side. Our story had started with a fight for justice and truth, but it had grown into something much larger, a testament to the power of community, the importance of resilience, and the enduring strength of love. As we watched the sun set over the garden, I knew that our journey was far from over. There would always be new challenges to face and new opportunities to seize. But with Nate by my side and our community standing strong, I was confident that we could handle whatever came our way. Because in the end, our greatest achievement wasn't just what we had built, but how we had built it together with hope, courage, and unwavering determination. And that, I knew, was a legacy that would last for generations to come.